سلام عليكم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Ayah does not mean verse. It's not the text itself. Does not mean a miracle. Of course, it's not a miracle because the ayah is just a sign. It points you in the right direction. It's a clue. So signs are perceived in our cognition, in our mental realm. The signs are not in front of us. The signs are received. So ayah does not reside in the text on the pages. Ayah resides inside your mind. It's not just on the pages of the Quran. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're driving in a foreign country, you've never been there, and you see a road sign, and you could easily pass by it and not understand what that specific road sign means to that country. So if you were a local person, that sign, that icon that is on the traffic sign will immediately register a specific meaning in your head. So that specific meaning was supplemented by the schema that that local person has for the traffic signs. Whereas you are a foreigner to that country, that traffic sign doesn't mean anything to you. I hope this is clear. We're going to keep moving. So what does the Quran say about this? Well, it turns out that there is a word that has been woefully, grossly misunderstood and misinterpreted by our scholars, unfortunately. And that word appeared in Surah Al-Hajj, Surah 22, verse 52. So we're going to deal with it in detail. I need you to be patient because this is really phenomenal. The ayah from Surah Al-Hajj 22:52 says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ مِن رَسُولٍ وَلَا نَبِيٍّ إِلَّا إِذَا تَمَنَّى أَلْقَى الشَّيْطَانُ فِي أُمْنِيَّتِهِ فَيَنْسَخُ اللَّهُ مَا يُلْقِي الشَّيْطَانُ ثُمَّ يُحْكِمُ اللَّهُ آيَاتِهِ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ حَكِيمٌ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, whenever we sent a messenger or a prophet before you, O Muhammad, whenever he wished a head of revelation, he made a wish, he longed for something, Shaitan would cast Shaitan's ways into the umniyatihi. I'm going to leave that word for just a few seconds until we analyze it. And then Allah would abrogate what Shaitan cast, and then Allah would clarify the discernment of His signs, and Allah is the provider of knowledge, the authority over discernment. So this is the rough translation. We're going to dive a little bit deeper. But first I want to focus on one key word, which is yansakh. This word right here, yansakh. Yansakh, when you see this, it is clearly indicating abrogation, meaning elimination, meaning removal, meaning cleansing, meaning nullification. Clearly, the meaning is very clear, the context is so clear, there's no doubt. So abrogation is the meaning or is the indication of the word yansakh or nasakha. So we do not accept the opinion, just an opinion, of people who say nasakha means to copy or to duplicate. That's not correct, because the Quran is clearly using it in this verse to mean to abrogate, to remove whatever the shaitan has cast into umniyatihi. So now let's look at umniyatihi. Umniyatihi, you see it in here with the red arrow, has this little squiggly mark right at the top, whereas the Arabic word umniyatihi, and you can read the English transliteration for it, you see that there is a shadda on the ya in the Quranic word. Now, this word is not an Arabic word. It does not fit any morpheme. It is not in any dictionary. Some people use it in the wrong way, but according to the pure Arabic, it is not there. It is not an Arabic word. It is a variation. It looks similar to umniyatihi, this one with the yellow arrow. So unfortunately, most books of tafsir use this word in their interpretation. And the same with all the translations, all of them. Every single one of them use this word to refer to this word. But the Quran is using this word right here with the red arrow, with the shadda on the ya. And we pronounce it umniyatihi. Umniyatihi. We stress ya in the middle. That's not an Arabic word. So most translators and interpreters, of course translators came much later, and they built on their translations upon the interpretations, the tafsir. But the books of tafsir, all of them refer to umniya, which is a wish, whereas the Quranic word is umniyatihi, not a wish. So what is that? Well, according to our methodology, we have discovered that sometimes the Quran concatenate words. It takes two words and puts them together and comes up with something new, something that sounds similar to something you're familiar with, but it's totally different. In this case, the word umniyatihi is a concatenation of two words. Umniyatihi, two different words. Please, those of you who are Arab speakers, just be patient and listen. I'm going to give you the evidence. I'm not speaking from vainglory and from fanciful opinions. I'm speaking based on very deep research. I'm going to show you the evidence for yourself. And you're going to be amazed because you did not know this. And no one has told you this. So, umniyatihi literally is a combination of which means mother, and niyatihi, which means his intention. So, in other words, umniyatihi is the mother of his intention, which is what we refer to as the framework, the schema, right? That's the basis of all of your intentions. Let me give you an example. So, if someone has built a mental framework based on success equal money, success equal material possessions, as they say in some countries, he who dies with the most toys win, right? So this is a mental framework. A lot of people today in the world are living their lives based on this schema. That person, anytime he wishes for anything, it has to be aligned with that mental framework. Success equal money. So the mother of his intention. That's the mental framework from which everything emanates. Remember, when we have such a mental framework, we're not aware of it most of the time. It's there, it's in the back of our mind. It's a schema that we've built over the years from experiences, from people who educated us, from the culture in general, but it has created this residue that has an impact, colored glasses that impacts everything we do. So let's take some examples. Is this true? Is this a valid way that the Quran provides bayyina, right? Is this an instrument that we can use to come up with evidence? Let's look at a couple of verses, and I laid out a couple of verses in here for you. The first two are really amazing. Really, really, truly amazing. The first two are referring to the story of Musa alayhi salam when he came back from meeting the angels and receiving the Torah on the mountain after they exited Misr. Of course, the story of the calf, the golden calf, and there was a conflict between Musa and Harun, his brother. And there was a dialogue. During that dialogue, Harun called Musa a certain label. That label is Yabna Yabna Umma, son of a mother, Yabna So this exact same scene is provided in two different places, one in Surah 20 and another one in Surah 7. And the exact same dialogue with one variation in the spelling. Many of you have asked me what's the point of providing copies of similar scenes from the same story but in different places in the Quran. This is one of the purposes. And this also proves that the actual spelling of the Quran was supervised directly by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as he was taught by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This proves definitely he was not illiterate. He knew how to spell because he was instructing them to write it this way and that way. Now, why is this so important? Because it's the same scene, the exact same dialogue coming out of the same mouth of the same person, the same expression, spelled two different ways. One in Surah 7, as you see, Ibna Umma, separate two words, and one is concatenating the two words in one word, which tells us, the Quran is teaching us, this is one of the bayinat. This is one of the instruments where you guys should look for evidence. And therefore, when we look at umniyatihi, that idea should occur to us. That's part of the methodology. That's part of how your software has reprogrammed you to see such evidence. If your software has not programmed you to accept this evidence, you would read it, pass it by, and you would say, no, there's a mistake in here. That's exactly what happened with the books of tafsir, unfortunately. Is there another example, Dr. Hani? Let's look in Surah Al-Insan, chapter 76. Surah 76, ayah 18. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the benefits or the pleasures that al-abrar, the scrupulous, enjoy in Jannah. I'm not going to talk much about Jannah, but we've talked about Jannah in the past, and we said there are 4 types of Jannah. One of them is in this life for people who are muttaqoon and scrupulous, abrar, and they work very diligently on interpreting the Quran and the verses of the Quran and extracting the terminology, salihat, from the ayat of the Quran. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that they drink from a fountain in such Jannah, and that fountain is called Salsabila. And that word right here, as you see it, where I'm moving the mouse, Salsabila, is not an Arabic word. Has nothing to do with the Arabic language. None of the interpreters, none of the tafsir books said that this is an Arabic word. And they all made up their own way of coming up with an interpretation for it. But using what we just did, which is the bayina of concatenating 2 words, we are able to break it up into 2 words. Sal sabila. Those who are Arabic speakers among you immediately recognize what this means. Sal, it's a command that means ask. Sabilan means your way. So your way to information is to ask questions. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, if you want to be in this Jannah and you want to drink from this fountain, you have to ask questions as a way to receive guidance. And here we have a beautiful nugget of information that I'm going to share with you. In one tafsir that I found, it's called Tafsir al-Kashaf, for a scholar called Az-Zamakhshari. Az-Zamakhshari report at the bottom of a page, when he's discussing this same verse that I showed you in here, the same ayah, 76:18, he says, وَقَدْ عَزَوْا إِلَى عَلِي ibn Abi Talib رضي الله عنه أن معناه سل سبيلا. And he says, it was reported that some people heard through a chain all the way to Ali ibn Abi Talib that this word sal sabila is actually a concatenation of 2 words, sal sabila. And then Az-Zamakhshari, this tafsir scholar, continues, وَهَذَا غَيْرُ مُسْتَقِيمٍ عَلَى ظَاهِرِهِ. And this is not correct as it appears. And he dismisses this piece of information, and he does not accept it as a bayina, as an evidence to extract knowledge and indications and ayat from the Quran. And therefore, they kept struggling to figure out what sal sabila, and they're still struggling to this day. Most of the books of tafsir don't have a clue what it means. They provide hunches and opinions, but it's not as we explained it in here. To ask questions as a way to get to the indications and the true ayat. Remember, ayat live in your mind. Ayat are not on the pages. Alright, so we've covered quite a bit so far. Let's go back to the verse where we were discussing the concept of umniyatihi, which is the framework or the schema. Let's analyze this verse one more time. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Quran, whenever we had sent a messenger or a prophet before you, whenever he wished ahead of revelation, meaning he was jumping ahead, he was claiming or hoping to receive something in the revelation. That's an opportunity for shaitan to come in and corrupt the schema, corrupt umniyatihi. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, but we protect those messengers and prophets by abrogating what the shaitan has cast into umniyatihi, and then we repair, and then we provide good guidance, good discernment for our signs toward that messenger or that prophet. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Allah was watching out to protect the messengers and the prophets from any kind of interference that is initially caused by their own longing, their own wishes. So you wish for something good for your people. Of course, every prophet and messenger wants to do that. But if you're jumping ahead, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a way to catch your own mistake as a prophet and as a messenger. Please pay attention to this, because we were taught that every prophet, every messenger was perfect. It's not true. It's right there. Tamanna, if he wished. And then shaitan enters and modifies the schema. Once the schema is modified, it can replicate. It can cause a lot of problems going forward. as you can see. So this concludes the part about this one verse. So we come back and continue with the concept of nasakh, abrogation. And we confirm that's what it means. So does abrogation means nasakh? Absolutely. Now, question is it referring to abrogation of the ayat of the Quran, the physical, textual segments, the sentences of the Quran, or is it referring to the ayat in our mental framework? And I think you already know the answer. And this is where they went wrong in interpreting the concept of nasakh. Yes, there is nasakh. The Quran confirms it. The Quran provides a clear context to explain that it is abrogation, it's not copying, but they misunderstood the domain where nasakh happens, the field, right? They applied nasakh to the ayat of the Quran, and in the process belied our dear Prophet ﷺ, because our Prophet ﷺ could not have made the mistake in keeping some of these ayats after they have been abrogated. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies this in another couple of verses, ayat, that we're going to cover. So it does not mean to copy clearly. Let's continue. This one verse is really important, and I want you to pay attention because we're applying another principle here, principle of the methodology. Ayah 45:29, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هذا كتابنا ينطق عليكم بالحق إنا كنا نستنسخ ما كنتم تعملون. The typical translation, if you open any translation or interpretation, they're fairly consistent. This here is our book testifying against you. In truth, we have been keeping a record of all that you used to do. Let me repeat. We have been keeping a record of all that you used to do. Now, this is supposedly a scene on the Day of Judgment. So let's ask this question, and I want you to be careful in how you ask it and how you think about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the tafsir and according to the translations, is saying we have kept a record of your actions. Now, is Allah's knowledge eternal and perfect or not? If it is, why does He need a record? Tough question, daring question. Of course, we're not challenging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are fully confident that Allah's knowledge is eternal and perfect. And therefore, their interpretation is wrong. It cannot be this meaning. There is no way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would say, oh, we kept a record about all of your deeds, all of your works. There is no way. The Quran would never say that, because Allah's knowledge is always perfect, so it could not be that we have kept a record. So therefore, we have to analyze, what does this word nastansikh? We have done nastansikh. All right? So this is the challenge. This is how you stop, you observe, you discover, and you ask daring questions, and you say it cannot be that the way they interpreted it is correct. We have to find another interpretation that's more suitable. We ascribe to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the eminence that's due Him. So let's do the analysis and we will dive into it. So first, I want to give you a very brief lesson in Nahu. Very, very brief, just related to one specific topic. It's called Hamzat as-Salb wal-Izala wal-Nafi. What does that mean? The letter Hamza, when it comes at the beginning of a verb, it flips its meaning. It takes away from its meaning and provides a negative opposite meaning to the original verb. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So this is from one of the famous books. The verb qasata, bima'na to oppress or to exceed his rights. Qasata. When you enter the hamza, aqsata, it becomes aqsata. It becomes the exact opposite. He is just. He implemented justice. Just by adding hamza, the verb or the indication of the verb switched and it became the opposite. Here's another example. Very famous mistake. Extremely popular mistake. And many of the so-called internet preachers and internet superstars are now making this mistake and misleading a lot of people. From Surah Al-Baqarah 184, وَعَلَى الَّذِينَ يُطِيقُونَهُ, this verb right here, يُطِيقُونَهُ فِدْيَةٌ طَعَامُ مِسْكِينٍ. Those who cannot bear it shall have the ransom of feeding a person in need. So the verb يُطِيقُونَهُ is often misinterpreted by those who want to claim that fasting is not required. And they misinterpret this verb because of this exact same problem. So يُطِيقُونَهُ is from the root taqa, or the past tense taqa, and the present tense is yatuqu. I apologize, it's not going to take very long, but I want to make sure that I'm convincing my Arabic speaking brothers. So please be patient for just one more minute and we'll be over. Taqa yatuqu, to bear. Ataqa yutiqu, not be able to bear. The opposite. So just by adding hamza in here, you have this verb yutiqu, which means you're not able to bear. So those who are not able to bear fasting should pay or should provide or offer a compensation. So the same thing now with the verb nasakha. This is why we're doing this lesson. Nasakha, ansakha. So we said nasakha, to abrogate. Ansakha is to strengthen or to fix or to make it more firm, right? Instead of eliminating it, nullifying it, actually make it more firm. So this verb is derived from this version of the verb, ansakha, which means to strengthen. So now it makes sense if we change the context a little bit. You go back to the verses, to the ayat of that verse right here, and you immediately recognize this translation is exactly the opposite of what is intended. The exact opposite of what was intended. Let me prove it to you. So now the translation based on this linguistic analysis is, this here is our book. And notice the word here. Here is often referred in the Quran to mean this dunya, in this life. This scene is not from the Day of Judgment. It's referring to something in this life. I know the context appears to be, the earlier verses appear to be on the Day of Judgment, but it's not. If you keep reading, you will find that you're back in this life. So it is very confusing to some people, but it's not confusing at all if you sit and reflect on it a little bit and you find out, no, this is referring to this book, this Quran. This here is our book, our Quran, proclaiming against you in truth, meaning we have told you exactly what to expect. We have told you exactly what we are expecting of you. And then the ayah continue, we have been having others nastansikhu, because this version of the verb ansakha, which is we take this one from it, means to request somebody else to do it, right? To request somebody else to strengthen all that you used to work. So in other words, this ayah is saying whatever wrong terminology you have developed and extracted, and you insisted on being a belier, you refuse the evidence that the Quran is giving you, and you refuse the methodology from the Quran, and you made up your own ways, your own sources, your own authoritative references, as we discussed in several other videos before. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, our book gave you the warnings, you refused them, and then we had others, either angels or the other humans, strengthen the conclusions that you falsely reached, you erroneously reached. Changes the meaning totally. Has nothing to do with making copies of your deeds. Of course, Allah does not need to make copies of your deeds. Allah's knowledge is perfect already. We don't need to worry about that concept being misinterpreted. So here we resolved several concepts by just a little bit of linguistic analysis and a little bit of confidence and ascribing to Allah His due reverence, His due eminence. وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ. They did not ascribe to Allah His due eminence and reverence. And as you see, when we apply the methodology with these principles of certainty, of reflection, of applying the linguistic analysis that are mandated in the Quran itself, then we reach the right conclusion. And it's very easy to understand what's going on. Now we get to the famous ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah 2:106. ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها ألم تعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير. And this is the beautiful interpretation that is the conclusion or the result of this research on nasakh, because it puts everything in perspective. Remember, I said that ayah resides where? Ayah is not on the paper. Ayah is in your cognition, in your mental framework, or the results of your own mental framework. So if you see a sign in the text, it jumps at you as something beautiful, something indicative, a clear clue that you're learning something new. As we just did with the verb nasakha, we've analyzed it and we received a beautiful conclusion. That's a sign, ayah. And now look what happens when we apply this new knowledge, this new revelation that just came to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a result of this analysis and as a result of the certainty principle that is part of the methodology. Then this ayah makes perfect sense. Watch this. It's like magic. It changes the meaning totally. Any sign that we abrogate, where? In your own worldview, in your own schema, in your own mental framework, or make you forget, we shall bring deeper understanding out of it, or a deeper understanding from another one like it. So what is this talking about? Now you see, when we analyze the earlier ayat about nasakh, we learned from those, and then we're bringing that information to here. This is applying learnings from other ayah to this ayah. This is exactly what this ayah is talking about. We shall bring deeper understanding out of this one, or a deeper understanding from another one related to it, like it, mithlaha, and then we bring it in here. So why didn't earlier scholars develop this ilm based on what the Quran is telling us very clearly? I think the answer is very clear by now. Because their mental frameworks came short. They just assumed the wrong assumptions. They were misleading themselves, and as a result, they not only misled themselves, but they misled others. And then after them, many generations of people to this day who still insist we have to follow them. Wrong Weltanschauung, wrong arsh. They're corrupting our arsh, the arsh that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created and that Allah established for Him to have governance on. No, they don't want Allah to have governance over it. They want themselves to speak instead of Allah. So this is the damage that these early reports about early scholars produced, and we are still living with the same problem. If you have access to any scholars or any leaders in your community, make sure they see these videos and get it in front of them so we can get some interaction. We start spreading this ilm as soon as possible. And then finally, if you have the time or if you have other means of supporting us, please contact us on the email in front of you, marvelousquran@gmail. Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah laqad ja'at rusulu rabbina bil haqq. I thank you very much for watching. Salamun alaykum.